Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is Austrian Grand Prix week, so naturally we'll be looking ahead to all things Red Bull Ring. Also on the show, though, we take a little further look into some of RNF's Razlan Razali's revelations in his exclusive interview with us at Crash.net. Also, some rider movements we haven't touched on too deeply as of yet, involving a Cal Crutchlow return. We'll also be taking a look back to last week at Silverstone, and a lot of you getting in touch about why you didn't go to see the MotoGP racing at Silverstone, or indeed if you did, and your thoughts on it. The recording date is Monday the 15th of August. My name is Harry Benjamin. Alongside me as ever is Crash MotoGP editor Pete McLaren and former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen. But first of all, though, we would have all seen and heard about the accident during the Suzuka endurance race involving Gino Rea a week or so ago. So we just wanted to take this time to say that everyone at Crash.net sends their thoughts to Gino and his family and friends. In fact, two-time endurance champion Terry Reimer has shared the latest news from Gino's family this morning, saying, "Gino has made our day. David, his dad, and Elaine, his mum, have said, we were by his side, and as soon as we spoke, he opened his eyes, looked right at me, then over to Elaine. We could see he was pleased to see us and tried to talk. We could hold his hands. He was squeezing ours. Gino is communicating, raising his eyebrows. Shannon, his sister, and Bella, his wife, went in next. They said, blink twice if you can understand me, and he did. The doctor said he didn't respond to any nurses, but was amazed when he saw the responses to his family, which he said it's a great sign." So encouraging news there from Gino and his family and doctors. It's still a long way to go, of course, but we send our thoughts and well wishes to Gino and to keep fighting as well, as always. But let's turn our focus then to some more of the racing action as we do. And of course, last week, gents, it was Silverstone. The low turnout was the huge talking point, Keith, wasn't it? And we got quite literally hundreds of comments, tweets, and a lot of them overlapping, saying the same thing. Either Silverstone is not the right track to go and watch bike racing, the money side of it, not just the cost of living, but actually when you get there, the parking, the ticket prices, the cost of a burger, not having any British riders, the way Dorna promote it. It's everything we kind of predicted, but it's worse in a way, isn't it? Because it's not just one problem.
I think you're right. I mean, it's not just, I won't say it's a problem. I think it's a smorgasbord of things that need tweaking. I mean, the overall event, I think that we have to be positive. The overall event was a great event. The British Grand Prix under the sun at Silverstone, 500 acres, was a great event. They put on lots of entertainment. I think the questions are mostly the parking. I think that it's kind of one of them things where you buy it. It was a bit like if you walked in to buy a telly and then on your way out you got charged for parking out the front. You'd be properly unhappy about it, really, wouldn't you? You just, those kind of extra charges. Nobody likes extras. You know, maybe some of the concessions that are there for beers and burgers and so on. Now, they're paying Silverstone, obviously, to be on site. Whoever the contractor is that Silverstone are paid by, will be paid by, they then set the prices, I would imagine. You know, there might be a situation where Silverstone can get a little bit more, should we say, in control of the cost of that. Maybe a 20% uplift on a pint of beer wouldn't be unacceptable. You know, someone's going to scream at me for that. But maybe with a situation where, you know, what you can buy it in a pub for, if it's 10 or 20% more at the Silverstone track, then, or at any track, then you might think to yourself, well, actually, it's not too bad a value for money, considering someone's got to drag their bloody bar into here, set it up, take it away again afterwards. Perhaps those are the kind of things that Silverstone can address. The overall cost, what shocked me was that it was 41,000 people on the Sunday. Is race day good value for money? Now, I think that if you had a 3-day ticket and you were there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it wasn't bad value for money. The campsites are good. The entertainment value on a Friday, Saturday night is good. Even on a Sunday night when you're going home, if you want to stay around for an hour, maybe 2 hours, there's entertainment on the stages as well. They don't just shut Silverstone, open the gates and let you flood out. There's a big staff situation at Silverstone. They had a lot of staff there this time to help you out the car parks, help you into the car parks. Whereas I've been to Grand Prix before, you know, checkered flag for the final round, and they open all the bloody gates, and it's a free for all to get out, and it's just a complete logjam. I think Silverstone did a lot of things right, but I think there were things that antagonised people into not going, and that I think has been, our mailbox has been full of those guys. Some you just are never going to please. The Donington versus Silverstone thing just gets on my nerves. You know, Donington's a good racetrack. You know, the facilities there are not as good as Silverstone's, pretty much. They're better since Palmer took up the lease on the place. Jonathan Palmer, obviously, MSVR, now have the lease on Donington, and he'll be working his magic at trackside. But there's no way that Palmer will put things at Donington that are going to lose him money. The biggest thing, I think, you touched on it, is British Grand Prix winner. We definitely need it. Our sport needs a 500cc. Sorry, showing my age slightly there.
Oh, dear.
We need a MotoGP winner. On this weekend, we just had a winner at the British Grand Prix, Speedway Grand Prix, at the Millennium Stadium, now the Principality Stadium, I think it is now, in Cardiff. Dan Bewley, fantastic, won the British Grand Prix. That will almost guarantee, and the fans, you've never heard a roar like it inside that stadium. If you've never been to Speedway before, the British Grand Prix is one to go to if you get an opportunity. And it was just something a little bit special. Dan Bewley won the British Grand Prix. Can you imagine if that had been Cal Crutchlow winning our MotoGP or whoever it might be? We need that situation. We've touched on it before. MSVR, Jonathan Palmer's group, and Silverstone, maybe they should be backing the likes of Vision Track, Michael Laverty's team, and others to be promoting these guys through. At the minute, we've got, the British Talent Cup is flying. I mean, the 14-year-old, what is he? Johnny Garness, I think he's a Vision Track guy as well. That's just beating the pants off everyone else. There's opportunities here, but you don't want it to stall. It's got to go forward. It's got to incrementally go forwards, like the CEV, the Junior World Championships in Spain. We need this ladder to continue to give guys the opportunity to move on. Rory Skinner did a great job. Went a bit under the radar in the media. And of course, that's the other side of things. The media were not behind the British Grand Prix like they were for the Formula One British Grand Prix. You saw it in every newspaper, every magazine, the build up to it. Now, I know the PR department at Silverstone try as hard as they can. Stuart Pringle, managing director, spoke to him many, many times in the last 2 weeks about, what to do, where to go. He's picking everybody's brains. It's not like they're loafing around down there and making up their own strategy. It's kind of they are canvassing for how they can make it better. The answer, as I can see you looking very stern, is the cost of seeing racing in the UK. For me, on Sunday, deep breath, was not the best value for money. 90 quid plus whatever it cost to park for 3 races plus the British Talent Cup, for me, wasn't enough on-track racing. And I think that's something that Dorna have basically melted it down to. Our market in Britain is different from everywhere else. Our fans are different from everywhere else to a great extent. Our expectations are slightly different as well. It's not... We won't go. It's not a case of going there just because it's the British Grand Prix. It has still got to represent value for money, whatever that is. If it was £100 a ticket, if it was great value for money, people would spend it, in my view, if they've got it. We are going through hard times here at the moment, which and straight off the back of World Superbikes at Donington, there's that other thing again. It's the Donington versus World Superbikes versus British Grand Prix. Where do we find that happy medium? Do we have less entertainment on stage and not 15 quid off the ticket? Parking, in my view, should always be part of the deal. Well, I mean, it's funny, I heard some rumour at the weekend that said something along the lines of the reason why they were charging for parking was to encourage people to go on motorbikes. Now, only a car bloke could think of that, because people that are going to go to a British Grand Prix, motorcycle British Grand Prix, is going to go on his bike if he's got a bike. The only reason he's not going on his bike is because it's slashing it down with rain, or they've only got a car. It's kind of, you can park your bike for free at the British Grand Prix. You don't have to pay to park your motorbike. You only pay for your cars. And the other thing was, there's not enough room for all the cars. Well, hang on a second. You had 140-something thousand people at the Formula One Grand Prix. They all go in cars. They all parked. I don't understand some of the kind of contradictions that go on in these things. Help me out here, boys.
There's so much. You've covered a lot of it, and Pete, I want to get your thoughts as well. But I just want to bring up a few people have said, which you've already reiterated, Keith. Made Flawsome on Twitter. There was no Rossi or Marquez. MotoGP is the best sport in the world. Dorna focuses on the Spanish market only. Perhaps need to bring in an international marketer. People are worried about energy prices, as particularly in the winter, so are worried about spending money on fun things like a MotoGP weekend. And then there was this one, which just did stand out for me. Just reiterating again the price. Pete, I don't know if you want to come in after this from Clayton Warner. I was there camping for the weekend, hoping for it to be a cheaper experience. We had bought general admission tickets and thoroughly enjoyed free roaming the grandstands on the Friday and Saturday so much that we considered to upgrade our tickets for the Sunday. We went and it was £50 a person. While we were inquiring about upgrading, there was an older gentleman who was there to try and get general admission tickets for the Saturday and Sunday. They wanted to charge him £200 for the Saturday and Sunday tickets. For anyone, that is a lot of money, which excludes getting there and food on the day, especially considering that we paid £180 for 2 weekend tickets the month before that. What made it even more sad was on Sunday, seeing the amount of empty grandstands just sitting empty for the entirety of the weekend, including the Vale grandstand, which was completely empty. Why charge £200 for a general admission ticket and leave all of the grandstands empty? I would much rather charge £50 and have the entirety of it full. It just didn't make sense to me, seeing the amount of people trying to buy tickets and then saying no after seeing the price. And I mean, that's a pretty damning indictment there from Clayton.
It is, and it all comes down to the perception of the value of money as well, doesn't it? As well as the actual cost, it's the perception. Do people feel like what they're getting back is worth what they're paying? And it's all the reasons that Keith's highlighted, isn't it? You always hope that with these kind of events that, and you do see this in particularly some of the flyaways, that there'd be some sort of cheap tickets so that everybody could get somewhere at Silverstone or somewhere at the racetrack. Okay, maybe they're not going to get the full, proper grandstand experience in the best viewing spot, but that there would be some tickets that are there that are accessible for pretty much anyone that wanted to go. But when the ticket prices are that high, and as you say, there's empty grandstands, the F1 Grand Prix with all of those people, all those grandstands that would have been there, you leave them up for another month or whatever. I mean, they're already in place, aren't they? I mean, if they're already there, most of them, I assume, have been carried over from that event. Well, let people in them, but that is the issue, isn't it? Cost is clearly a big thing here. And again, when you don't have a British winner, the perception of the cost changes, doesn't it? And maybe that's the thing. You have to adjust the price to the situation almost yearly. What sort of situation are we in here as a sport in the UK or whichever event it is, and judge it against that. I think you can't just charge a blanket rate year in, year out and think that people will just keep coming back, because they will look at it, and they will look at other sports, as Keith says. I think the BSB was being advertised at Cadwell. Is it £33 for a race ticket or something on the race day? Those are the sort of things that people are looking at, the World Superbike at Donington. They've got choices. They're going to look at it and say, is this good value for money? The car parking thing, we all heard this, didn't we, from various fans? This was a thing that really got to people, but there were these other charges on top. I think when they see the ticket price, they can maybe budget for it and they make their decision, and then you almost get hit with a surprise charge, isn't it? It almost feels like something that sort of caught you at the last minute that you weren't expecting, and nobody likes that. As Keith gave the example of going to buy a TV or something, you don't want a charge sprung on you, do you? Nobody likes that. So all of these things are factors, and they all need looking at. But as Keith says, we should also give credit to Silverstone for the organisation. I mean, we've all been in massive queues getting into Grand Prix circuits or out of them. Silverstone, it ran like clockwork. And okay, you can say, well, there weren't as many fans, but still, the organisation to get people in, get people out. You could see this was a venue that is used to dealing with these large numbers of people and putting on a successful event. But you need to get the fans there.
Even Mugello overpriced themselves this year. And that really is God's country. Mugello in the Tuscan Hills, and the fact that they overpriced themselves. I know the Valentino Rossi factor. I tend to. It's funny. I had a conversation this morning with Matt Oxley. About things general. It rolls on a bit with me and Matt when we start going on about it. But it's a situation where, they don't seem to quite get it. Some promoters. And I feel that Silverstone missed the mark this year, but I don't think they'll miss it again. I think that I suspect they will have lost money at the weekend, which will be a major factor for making sure they get it right next time around. I think Formula One, and I hate to say this, obviously, is propping up MotoGP at the moment. But there are so many things, small things here and there. Once you lose the confidence, the Valentino Rossi factor is important, but I take the same attitude as pretty much as Matt and pretty much anyone else who's been in the sport for a long time. Valentino is just one of many great superstars who's now finished racing. we move on. Marc Marquez, we're looking forward to him coming back. The sport is bigger than an individual, I believe, and great racing, again, it's difficult for the likes again of me and Matt, in as much as that we support probably more the sport than we do an individual. Valentino Rossi, great having him there. Marc Marquez, one of the best motorbike racers I've ever seen. Will he be back? We don't know. But the fact is, the sport is great. It's looking really good. Unfortunately, at the moment, it coincides, with it's not quite as exciting at MotoGP level as it's been. Moto3 is outstanding still. It's probably the best race I've ever seen in Moto3 at Silverstone, barring maybe one at Phillip Island previously. But we're in a bit of a difficult position here. There needs to be a lot of changes made, but they're only really small ones. The sport is really good. I think Dorna need to get a handle on the fact that the value for money thing on track. I think they need to sort that out. I think there's not enough going on track. Silverstone have got all their entertainment sorted and their stages and stuff like that sorted, but they've got those niggling little bits and pieces that need to be addressed. Car parking, is too much. People are going to look at it next year, whereas you'd normally just pay it and buy the ticket and go. Now everyone's looking at it. Now everyone's focused on it, and that's your problem now. It's the perception of expense, rather, like you said, Pete, rather than the actual expense. Is it worth it? What else can we go to?
Another thing that was brought up briefly, which I hadn't really thought about either. Richard Evans said, we go every year, but couldn't this year because the date changed. Now it's in the middle of the school summer holidays. Whereas before, it was a August bank holiday weekend. You could still go and spend a day with the family. And now the same date is being confirmed for next year. So I won't be going on top of that and the parking charges. But we spoke about it so much. I don't want to dwell on it too long, but we'll end with a positive experience from Nick Rea, who took his nephew to Silverstone for his 10th visit and his first bike race ever, and he absolutely loved it so much that he wants to go. This was the nephew, wants to go for the full weekend next year. We sat and watched every race. He was intrigued who was winning, what country they're from, what make each bike was, what colours the teams are, and to top it off, there was some awesome display of BMX dirt jumping in between, which made his day. Hats off to Silverstone and Monster Energy. Can't wait until next year. P.S. We're going to Thruxton to watch the BSB this weekend, so hopefully the new wave of British bike racing fans is safe too. So that's a nice positive experience there.
Well, I think it's nail on head, isn't it? The fact is that one of the points I made last week when we were talking about this was we've got too many bald grey heads in the field watching what's going on, which is great because they're our major key fans. But the fact is the next generations need catering for. And I think that's where the interactive side of it comes in as well. Technology that we've got available now to all of us should be enhanced, embraced in places like Silverstone. You should be able to, the kids should be able to look up whatever they want, all the stats and stuff that's going. The kind of, the stuff that's going out on MotoGP.com should be readily available to everyone, which it is if you know where to look for it. But you've got to point newbies in the right direction for this kind of stuff. How often do you do research, the two of you, everybody listening? You're on Google, you're having a nose through where I can find this information, and all of a sudden you eke out one little gem. Well, they shouldn't have to be able to look for it like that. Silverstone, Dorna, and the rest should be pushing that stuff all the way through the day, through the circuit commentary, through gate entry recordings, whatever it might be.
You need to make it easy, don't you? Easy for the fans.
Really do. Well, newbies are newbies. It's hard to find your way when you're at a racetrack for the first time ever and you're looking around 500 acres. Where the bloody hell do I go? Where do I get the information, from? There almost ought to be like a interactive booklet, if you like, when you walk in through the gate. Here you go. Plug that into the side of your computer or whatever, however you download the stuff, and look it all up as you go. There should be these kind of interactive guides. And nowadays, there's no excuse for not having that because it's so cheap. Barcodes, buddy, whatever them QR code things that you just flash your camera on and comes up with all the info. They ought to be everywhere.
I was just thinking that when you said that, I was like, wouldn't it be great? You go in the gate, scan the QR code, a whole guide goes into your phone or whatever.
Phone or tablet or
wouldn't
whatever.
That be so easy?
Yeah. All that stuff, that should be there. I said it last week, pit lane cameras, stuff that you can access from your handheld devices so you can check in on the pit of your favorite rider or all of them if you want to, stuff that you can access. All of that is out there. It's funny enough, I had this conversation, as you might have guessed, of recent times. We've had a little bit of trouble with our broadband round here at Huewen Towers. So I had an engineer in this week, and I've discussed it with him. He comes from a massive company that puts his stuff in everywhere and hooks it up to broadcasters and so on and so forth. And it really is simple. You know, it's stuff nowadays that it's like bread and butter to them, but it kind of is. It's there on a. Maybe these things need looking at as well in depth. I mean, it's all got a cost involved in it.
That's it. I mean, and also, you know, as you say, I think the QR code thing is a great idea, but why not let people access, let's say, the live coverage, live video coverage for that event as part of the price of the ticket, so that if you're at the track, you know.
Oh, now you're treading on a massive nerve. You know, the broadcast is going. BT's broadcast is going out on all the money. I think that's a bit of a coup, actually. What they've done is they've done away with poor old Fred Clark and the like, and they've got a sort of a circuit commentator that fills in the gaps when BT aren't broadcasting. But you're getting BT's broadcast at the track. The only way that you're going to be allowed to see that on handhelds and the like is if you've got a subscription to BT.
Well, can I just say the final question I wanted to ask you, which has been brought up by Matt Randall: should MotoGP be free to air in the UK all season long?
No.
Really?
Because it's not the model that works for the promoters around the world. I mean, I think it's from a fan point of view, of course it should. Everybody wants everything for nothing. Of course we do. But it's something that's not for nothing. It's the top line sport that needs funding. You know, Dorna would not be in a position to have bailed out our sport during a pandemic if they'd not had enough in the coffers over the period of time. You know, they basically gave 2 years worth of compensation to Moto3 125. Bloody hell,
you're really showing your age.
To Moto3 and Moto2. Yeah, age is a good thing, Harry, because you can make comparisons with how it was to where it is now, and basically where it is now is in a good place. Believe me, from back in the day. I remember it when it was horrendous, when there was no facilities, when there was no coverage, where there was nothing at all. The gaps in the racing were 5 seconds between riders. You know, I can go on for as long as you like. These days are good days. Don't ever underestimate what we are getting from Dorna, from Silverstone, and from most of the other promoters. You know, it's a great sport that's in a very good place, but it needs just a bit more sorting out for trackside fans. And I've got to say, doesn't matter who the broadcaster is, they are never going to make it look as good as it does when you stand at trackside. It's impossible. You know, I've been going to race meetings all my life. I've been watching it on telly every single weekend. I still watch all of BT Sports coverage, record everything from Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and listen to them bloody goons every single week. And the fact of the matter is even with their great broadcast as it is, it's not as good as being there. You know, be there, come home and watch the recording later. Being at trackside when one of those MotoGP bikes goes past, it stands the hairs on my arms up now talking about it. You know, there is no substitute for being at trackside. And so therefore the promoters and Dorna have a responsibility to give us what we need when we're at trackside. I think they missed the mark at Silverstone slightly, but it was only slightly. And it comes down to things that can be fixed. I think accessibility, looking after the next generations coming through, if their parents aren't dragging them along, like that gentleman who you just talked about going for the 3-day event next time, if you're not going to bring kids in, if kids are not having a great time with their parents at an event, you mentioned earlier it's in the school holidays, so what? It's in the school holidays. Great opportunity to take your whole family to Silverstone to watch it. So make a family ticket affordable so a whole family can go, because they are tomorrow's spectators. They are tomorrow's fans. You know, if you've not got your bloody, you know, anything from 10-year-old upwards, mind you having said that, you know, if you're watching the BTC race, they're not much older than 10-year-olds. So at the end of the day, not only have you got encouragement for watching the top guys and the countries they come from and all the surround geography that goes with it, you've got a situation where tomorrow's racers might be coming from inside that crowd that are going there, that are seeing the BTC race that's got 13, 14, 15-year-olds in it and thinking, where can I ever go at that, Dad? You know, and with Pringle mentioning before that they're going to enhance a go-kart track there, in other words, a track that could well cater for mini bikes, you know, you've got a whole raft of things that follow on to each other that are integrated. And that's where we're missing it. There are just so many opportunities to make this bigger than what it is at the moment. But the key is always going to be at trackside to get families through there. If you've not got, it's all very well Dad and his mates going on their bloody super duper bikes that, they clad themselves in leather and go down to Super Sausage for a breakfast and then trundle off to Silverstone because they can afford 200 quid. You need the families in there. That's the future.
And just briefly, that is also where the free-to-air has a role, though, isn't it? Because the trouble with pay-per-view is, yes, it's funding more than half the paddock. I mean, there's no doubt, as you say, Keith, without that, MotoGP would be in massive trouble. But people are not going to fork out to watch a sport that they don't know anything about. So free-to-air has that role in getting people to go, oh, what's that? I'll watch that. It's on TV. So you always need some free-to-air, don't you? You can't do it at the expense of pay-per-view, but certainly free-to-air gets in the next generation, gets kids going, the mum dads come in, what are you watching there? Oh, I don't know. It says MotoGP. It looks like fun. And then they go and watch the race. The trouble is, if everything is completely pay-per-view, it's almost walled off, isn't it? It's hard for people to get in and experience it in the first place. That's all I would say on that.
I agree with you to a point, but I think that free-to-air, we had free-to-air for the British Grand Prix. That was a pretty big coup to get free-to-air on ITV for our biggest event of the year here in the country. Whether that cost Silverstone in bums on seats as well it may be a contentious issue. Free-to-air for sure, occasional free-to-air, but I don't believe that it gets you found. I don't think some kid walks in the lounge and sees MotoGP on and sits and watches it. They need to feel it. Kids nowadays are bored within a minute. As soon as you've got bloody Hodgie and the rest of them bouncing around being smart in front of the camera, they're not interested in that. It's not even funny to them. The fact of the matter is that they want to be at the track. When I take my kids, I'm very lucky to have young kids still. And when I take them somewhere, it's take them somewhere. It's not watch it on TV. It's not like YouTube. We don't have a Drive to Survive. We've been there already with this subject at the moment. Our Drive to Survive equivalent didn't quite work out. I believe that it will, and they will make an effort to make that work. It's about being there and sucking it up and feeling it. And in between the fairground rides and the being able to buy the burgers and going and buying a bit of merchandise and all the other things that a family needs, a whole family needs that. You can't just base it on the racing if you are going to encourage for the first time a family in through the gate. That's the problem. Walking through the lounge while I've got MotoGP on, I don't think any of my kids watch MotoGP. And they are big into racing because of me. They don't come and sit with me and watch a MotoGP practice or a MotoGP race. They might come in and have a quick squint at it. And because I shout, "Wah!" I'm screaming in the chair and I'm jumping up and down like a bloody lunatic, annoying the neighbours. My kids will poke their head round the door and go, "What's the matter with that old git?" It's kind of, you've got to get these families on site. They've got to feel just how great it is, and then they'll watch TV, and then they'll watch it, whether it's free to air or pay-per-view. It's about making lifelong fans and lifelong experiences at trackside. And I genuinely feel that that's the case. I mean, I've got a couple of mates of mine who kids, they know more about MotoGP than I know. They know the names, they know the ages, they know where they come from. I'm talking about a 9-year-old, I think he is, one of the boys. And he is absolutely, because his dad takes him to Grand Prix. And he's absolutely stands at the fence waiting for a rider to go by and to get those autographs and to meet the people. So to enhance our sport, to grow our sport, the youngsters have got to feel it. They've got to be there as a family. They've got to enjoy it as a family. It's a community thing as much as anything. It's not about the bald old bloke. As much as we love the bald old bloke that loves motorbike racing, the fact is I'm going to go and watch it if it's pissing down with rain, freezing cold, sunny, or whatever it is. It's a given that we're going to bike races, but it isn't for the family, and they're tomorrow's kids. And you've got the families that are scared of encouraging their boys or girls into riding motorcycles. That's another level of, there are a lot of families who would discourage, their kids from getting involved in bikes because of the extra level of danger in being involved in that situation. We know all the horrendous stories there are. But again, with the right training and the right encouragement, and I know about this. I've got a 17-year-old who's just passed her test. And it scares the life out of me when she disappears out of here at 10 o'clock at night to go and meet her mates in her car, because she's got no experience on the road really at that night time. Yeah, she's passed her test very recently. And you go, ooh, slightly scared of it. And again, I can feel as a parent what some parents might feel now. I don't want to go near motorbikes because, they might get off on that. And if they do and they want one, how am I going to feel about that? So there's that other perception that's out there with bikes as well. Bloody hell.
I know.
I'm rambling on here,
and also,
boys.
he's got a name, that bald old man. It's Pete. You just say his name.
He's a bloody sight younger than me.
Can't call you old Pete. But look, it's clearly...
Hang on a minute.
Yeah, come on. Sort the toupee out for those who can't see. Sorry. Sort the hair out. Look, it's clearly an issue that we can talk about all day long, but and thank you as well to everybody getting in touch and giving their opinions on that one. It really means a great deal. The hundreds of you that did. Sorry we can't get through them all, but a lot of you, I think, saying the same things. So hopefully Silverstone see that.
Can I just say one thing? Keep it up as well. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time and you haven't heard the ones we've done before, keep up sending these things into Crash, because we don't ignore them. And the fact of the matter is that last week's Crash podcast, Stuart Pringle was listening to in his car, managing director of and one or two other people at Silverstone were listening to our podcast last time out. And I've had a couple of emails since then from Silverstone regarding our podcast, particularly at the time, and the ideas and what it prompts. They will be looking at our timeline as well as us. It's not just Crash that look at the timeline. Other people are looking at those timelines as well. So your comments are being picked up by the main people, by Silverstone, by anybody that's interested in giving the trackside, fans something more. They are listening.
It's like
they
Big
are looking.
Brother. They're listening. They're looking. Hi, Stuart. Glad to have you on board. Right. Let's park that one there for now, though, and move on. And actually, Pete, obviously this week, bit of a scoop, a Crash exclusive. RNF team principal Razlan Razali. You sat down and spoke with him. Lots covered. You can read the full article, of course, on crash.net. The Dovi retirement, Crutchlow's return, Darren Binder's rookie campaign, swapping Yamaha for Aprilia next season. What were some of the highlights that you took from that chat? It seemed like it was a bit of a surprise, that Dovi retirement, to him.
Yeah, it did seem that way. Yeah, so the interview was Friday at Silverstone, so the day after Dovi had announced that he would be sort of retiring. And yeah, I mean, as Razin sort of said, they kind of knew that Dovi wasn't happy, and they obviously weren't expecting him to continue next year. But yes, I think to be stopping at Misano, so he's only got a couple of races left now, did come as a surprise to the team. But then, as Razin said, if the rider doesn't want it, he's not happy, he's tried everything. As Razin said, he's been in there in the meetings where Dovi's talking to the Japanese engineers, and they've almost exhausted every option. It got to the point where Razin was saying to them in the team, just go out and enjoy it. But I mean, you can't tell a MotoGP rider, Keith Huewen said, they're not going to enjoy it unless they're at the front or they're competitive. That's the reality. And I think Dovi just realised that, the time is up and he's called it a day. And in comes Cal. So, Cal, of course, rode for the team last year as one of the stand-ins. They went through this rotation of riders. I did ask Razin, were other people considered, but they didn't want to go through that whole sort of roundabout of different riders every week, if you like, that they went through last year. So Cal is committed for the full final 6 races. So that'll be interesting to see what Cal does on that bike. He's been testing more, apparently. Razin said he's fitter, he's in better shape than last year, and things like that. So yeah, he'll come in from Aragon onwards, and we'll see what he can do on that bike. And it seems like he'll probably be developing some things for next year's Yamaha. Obviously, RNF are going to Aprilia. You touched on it there. What was the main reason for this switch? And it really seems to have come down to that Yamaha were only offering another short-term deal, and Razin needs a long-term commitment from the manufacturer in order to build this team up, get the sponsors in and everything else. He's done a good job, really. I mean, there was a lot of people sort of, how's this going to go? But, the team, as he said, it's not working out of a car boot. We were doing the interview in the team's hospitality. It's an impressive hospitality, double layer thing. We're upstairs, and he's got the presentation right. Razin's always big on getting things professionally looking good. He's CEO of Sepang before. He's used to dealing with big events and big sports as MotoGP obviously is. But as he said, he's on his own now. You've got to find the sponsorship, and that's the big change now. Before he had Sepang backing him, if you like. He had a big sponsor in Petronas. Now he's out there doing it for himself. But he's got this multi-year deal with Aprilia. Obviously tried to get a bit out on who the riders might be for next year, but he wasn't taking the bait on that one. He's wait and see. They feel that there's enough good young riders out there, this mix of youth and experience, that they can just sit back a bit and wait and see. So, will we know more at this weekend, KTM's home Grand Prix? You've got to imagine that there'll be some announcements from KTM. All of the top guys at Red Bull and KTM will be there, clearly. So I think some things will become clearer this weekend. Maybe Pol Espargaro's future, for example.
Razlan Razali, I tell you, he came from big budget when Petronas was there. I wonder how much of that Petronas money sort of drifted over to this year to keep him going as well. I mean, it looked at one stage that it was a bit precarious by losing Moto2, Moto3 and concentrating everything on MotoGP. But he's a smart cookie. And I think the Aprilia move is a really, really good one and very timely for both Aprilia and for him. It's going to work out.
If you want to read the full story, it's on crash.net now. So do take a look at that. And talking of Austria, let's look forward to it, shall we? Round 13, and lots of things we think on the horizon, as you suggest there, Pete. KTM home track might be offering up some announcements. We think a Ducati decision might be imminent too. Marquez is going to make a comeback, but not on the track. He's just going to watch as a punter. Vinales back up and running, we think too. Maybe a win on the cards. Before we deep dive into all of that, Keith, the track, Austria, Red Bull Ring, what's it like? And we've got a little bit of a tweak for this year.
Well, the Österreich Ring, as it was one of the greatest racetracks, one of the most dangerous. But if you go right back in the history of this racetrack, it is just got something about it. If you look back over some of the old YouTube videos of car racing there and the like, what a place. Anyway, the Österreich Ring, as is now Red Bull Ring, bought obviously by the guy who owns the rights to Red Bull in Europe, Massastich. And the Turn 3 incident of where we saw Zarco and co flying over the head of Valentino Rossi and so on and so forth, and the big panic that came in after that Turn 3 very nearly disastrous accident. They've put this zigzag in now halfway down the hill towards Turn 3. I just wonder if there's a 2-year-old that was squiggling on the piece of paper that Tilke was working on to make this work. I really don't get it. They've done what they needed to do, I suppose, to slow things down when you get to Turn 3. But I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the riders actually make of it when they get there. I'm sure they'll just bite their lip and get on with it because there is no choice. But it just looks horrendous. It just is literally, the mark of Zorro on the map, zigzag straight across it. Someone's had their wand out and they've dug this new bit of tarmac in there.
No.
As you can tell, I'm not really a fan, but at the end of the day, that's me looking at a piece of paper, not riding it. Let's see how the riders get on with it when we get out there in the first practices. But it's a stop-start chicane at the end of the day, and it's not one of my favourite cures for something that could have been cured so much nicer than that. It's just horrendous from my own personal point of view.
And in fairness, I should just add in there, Quartararo was asked about Austria at the end of the Silverstone race and this new chicane. Might this help you having a couple more corners there? And he went, well, actually, it's going to be worse for me because Turn 3 under braking was where I was making up time. But more to the point, he also said, it looks a bit dangerous to me. So, there's a few people have said this because the original track, we should say, still exists, doesn't it? It's still used by Formula One. MotoGP sort of pulls off the track, then crosses the track, and then rejoins it again. And there is the potential, if a rider loses control on the way in, that they could come into contact with the riders further on in the chicane. And so Quartararo, there we go. He won't be the only one who's looking at that chicane and wondering, hang on a minute, is this solving one problem and maybe creating another?
Of course it is. And that's what you get at racetracks. I mean, the situation at Silverstone, do we rule out Maggots, Beckett's and Chappell? Because there's a potential possibility of someone falling down in the middle, and we had a bike in the middle of there. I can't remember who it was now that left their machinery in the middle of the track. I mean, it happens in so many of these cases. Bikes and riders, travel across sometimes the chicane into the track. They rejoin the track. If the bike picks up and decides to go further down the hill, it will do. The velocity of these things and the science behind, what a bike can do if it just happens to hit the ground in a certain manner is almost unfathomable from a fix. It's going to be impossible. And sticking, like I say, this bloody zigzag in the middle of, that turn 3 had never been a problem. Yeah, you're approaching it right old rapid rate of knots. It was only because Zarco tagged the back of someone else on the way down the hill. Yeah, he makes up time. He certainly made up time on that occasion when he ended up clobbering the rear end of another machine, and down the road they all went, and arrived at turn 3 when people were turning in through it. Anyone that's not seen the video should take a look at it. Fortunately, no one gets hurt, so it's a video worth watching just from the horrendous consequences could have been. I've never seen Valentino Rossi sit on his pit box looking visibly shocked as he was after that event. So, and clearly what they did in the end was extend the barrier out into turn 3 a little bit more, so that anything that did come down the hill that was a wayward was going to go into the barrier, which again is never a good idea, because riders, contacting a barrier is not the way it should be, because that retardation in speed is never good for a human body. I don't know. It just seems to me that the manner in which they fixed it, in inverted commas,
what is also
great.
going to be on the minds of everybody is the weather. And I have just looked it up, because after last year, of course, absolute mayhem in the race, which saw Brad Binder win out in the end, Friday looks wet, thunderstorm, Saturday wet, Sunday wet. It is only Monday, so that weather could change. And of course, with Spielberg and the Red Bull Ring being in the mountains, it tends to sort of fluctuate with that weather, but it can come in very quickly. So that's going to be a massive characteristic this weekend.
Very quickly indeed. And it does. It's, if you're up there, it don't get that green for no good reason. Green usually means rain, and it is rather beautiful up there. So, and when it comes in, whether it be mist, fog, even when it's hot, when the sun's up, it seems to amplify the whole thing as well. So whatever we've got coming, it's going to be an extreme.
And what we do have coming, of course, Pete, is Marc Marquez back to the Austrian Grand Prix. First time back in the paddock since Mugello, I think. Not riding, just purely joining Honda to reconnect with the team, I suppose, to get a bigger understanding. He is still believably, the highest ranking Honda rider. And he hasn't been around for the last few races. And that just highlights what a dire situation the team's in.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely, Harry. You're not the only one to highlight that statistic. Yeah, there's a lot of people in the paddock also saying that as well. And Marc's coming back now.
Because,
let's be honest.
but every week I feel a bit better, and I'm optimistic to be on the bike as soon as possible. But I don't know exactly which will.
This is Marc Marquez. He's going to come back. I should think he'll have meetings with HRC. What's going on with the new bike? When will it be available? We know Marc's his recovery is progressing. He's got a medical check again at the end of this month, and potentially, could the comeback occur sometime after that, which would put him in line with September. There's the Misano test, usually when we see the first versions of the next year's bike. So, all of these things, I'm sure Marc will be talking about with Honda. We know they're losing probably 2 of their riders, aren't they? At the moment, they've only got Taka, who's trying new parts. It seems Pole doesn't seem to be trying new parts. Probably because he's not going to be there next year. We think he's off to Tech 2R and KTM. Alex Marquez said his bike is the same as Qatar. That was his words at Silverstone. So he's not either. So, at the moment, there's Taka's trying a new chassis, sort of mixed things with it. The race went quite well, but on Saturday, he seemed to be lost with it. So it still seems unclear the direction that they need at Honda. And I think Marc arriving, he said this is a critical time for HRC. And I think Marc arriving, he's going to want to know, right, what's going on here? What's the state of play as far as next year? And I believe that's what Marc's interest is here. He's not coming just to cheer on the team, let's be honest. So I think it'd be a busy weekend for Marc and Honda. And I think he's going to want some clear answers. They obviously want to know clear answers from him. How's your recovery going? What's the situation? How are you compared to before the accident? All these kind of things. So, I think this will be about planning for the future for Marc and Honda.
He's doing his homework. That's what I like about Marc. He's methodical in his homework as well. So, I think he's got a lot of questions to ask of Honda. I think he's got more to ask them than they've got to ask him. His bit's pretty simple. He's either fit or he's not. And judging by what I'm seeing, I mean, obviously, you can't get definitives from anybody, but it's looking pretty good. His return is imminent.
Well, it's been a pretty remarkable, I suppose, actually. And I find it interesting saying he disconnected too much during his last operation from MotoGP. So he's made a much bigger effort this time around to sort of stay in touch with the team and and test rider, of course, Stefan Bradl, just to make sure he can hit the ground running this weekend, I suppose, and be up to speed in the meeting rooms, and then eventually come back not too far away, it seems, hoping to be back on an RCV by the end of the month, it seems. So all the best continued for the recovery, Marc Marquez, and I'm sure he'll be all over the TV screens this weekend. Pete, you brought this up off air. We think it's been dragging on a bit for a little while now, this Ducati decision. We think this might be the last round before we get a decision as to who will partner Pecco Bagnaia. Will it be Enea Bastianini? Will it be Jorge Martin? Of course, Bastianini and Martin had a great ding-dong fight in Silverstone. Bastianini just pipping Martin at the end. But we're still really, from our side of things, none the wiser as to who it might be.
It still seems a pretty even fight, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah, as far as we know, if everything is still going to plan anyway, the decision is supposed to come at the end of August, after this round. And that would also fit in with, you've got Misano coming up, Ducati's home event. So I guess they want it all out in the open, if you like, by that round. Who will be Pecco Bagnaia's teammate and who will be the other Pramac rider alongside Zarco. So that's really the decision to be made here. If you look at it on paper, of course, Bastianini 4 wins and Martin no wins this year. But then if you look at the last 5 races, Martin's outscored Bastianini almost double the points, I think. So, yeah, it's still, it would be easier, I think, for Ducati if Martin was to be the clear favourite, because he's in that sort of, he's a bit further up that ladder, isn't he, towards the factory team. He's already at Pramac. He could move up. There's then a space for Bastianini. Otherwise, you've got Bastianini who's jumping from, of course, a year-old bike all the way to the factory team. And you've also got things like 2 Italians in the team, an Italian and a Spaniard. You open up more marketing possibilities, etc., etc. So big weekend, really, I think. I mean, if one of them was to have a really big result here, could that swing things? I mean, why not? It certainly potentially could. Bastianini's had some, the last few races haven't gone great for him. As you say, Silverstone was a great race. So he got the momentum back on his side. Remember, he had a broken wing. So he finished 1.6 seconds from victory with one wing missing. And we've heard from riders previously that the bikes nowadays are almost unrideable when they lose a wing. So, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. It could have been Bastianini's 4th win of the year on Sunday and at Silverstone. And that would have swung things, I think, very heavily in his favour. But as it is, Martin's a former winner in Austria, we should say. So, he could well be at the front this weekend as well.
A lot of pressure and the weather. These are things that are going to be, win or choke. It's going to be a very interesting weekend from everybody's point of view there. Who's your money on that, Pete?
As far as the decision or the race? The decision. I mean, as I say, I think Ducati would like it to be Martin, but I think Bastianini's making it really difficult.
Do you think they would actually think, is it going to be one amazing result, or are they actually they're going to look back at the season as a whole?
The season as a whole, at the end of the day, you've got to look and analyze every single race and see, what the performances were in the context that they were in, I think. And that will come down again. They'll look at weather conditions, track conditions, tyre conditions. It's not sort of stick a pin in a piece of paper between the two of them, although I agree with Pete. This is one of the toughest decisions they're going to make.
Well, who would you
pick? That variable that Pete... Pete, the variable that Pete said regarding the upgrade in motorbike. Now that can destabilise a rider quite quickly. They're really used to the way one motorcycle handles and performs and behaves. And as soon as you stick them on a factory bike, my experience of factory bikes is that they're not quite what you might think they are, because they are further up the development ladder. They have nuances and you need to ride them in a specific way. Quite often you need to ride them completely differently to perhaps an ordinary production bike, if you like, a bike that's been well used and is user friendly because so many different riders have been on it, and it's tuned into a more less aggressive animal, whereas the factory bikes are always that little bit pointier, that little bit sharper, that they demand more from a rider to get the best out of it. If you're a great rider, you'll find your way around it. I'm talking Marc Marquez perhaps with the Honda. That Honda is a nightmare of a motorcycle to ride. Marc Marquez knew exactly how to use it. No one else really did. We're seeing, I'm not saying the Yamaha is a monster to ride, it isn't, but Quartararo is the only man that can get the best from that Honda package consistently at the moment. There may be other reasons for that at the moment. Morbidelli's never looked quite the Morbidelli that we saw from before, since his accident. So, there are other reasons for that. But what I'm saying is factory bikes never quite, they're the thing that we all aspire to as riders, but then you get one and you think, Jesus, this is going to be hard work. And it generally is, until you hit the sweet spot.
And that's the thing. Of course, he's on a GP22, Martin, isn't he? But the engine is slightly different to Bagnaia and Miller. They went with this slightly different engine spec. So there's, as you say, as Keith says, it's not easy to make a direct comparison here. You've got different bikes out there. You've got Marini and the two Pramac guys on let's say, the original GP22 engine. And then the factory guys sort of went back a bit to something in between the 21 and the 22. So, and then of course Bastianini on the full 21 engine from last year. So yeah, there's a lot. And then you throw in Martin's hand surgery that he had. So he's, it's not an easy one, as we're saying. It's not an easy one, and it's a big decision for them. You've also got to look at Bagnaia. You don't want to destabilize, let's say, your number one guy, but really what you're looking at here is that they're bringing in another guy almost as a backup, because the relationship between Miller and Bagnaia is great, isn't it? If they were putting all their eggs in Bagnaia's basket, you would keep it as it is. Instead, they've chosen to let Jack go, if you like, and Jack's found another place at the factory KTM team, which means that they're ambitious about this. They're looking for another rider to really to push things forward, potentially be a number one. I don't think there's going to be a clear-cut number one at Ducati next year.
It's interesting on that. JC has asked, will Bagnaia struggle or prosper with a stronger teammate when either Martin or Bastianini are promoted? He clearly enjoys the current dynamic with Miller as a wingman, as opposed to a direct rival who would not play second fiddle as kindly.
I think Bagnaia, there's no way Jack Miller plays second fiddle, believe me on that one. Bagnaia is his own man. Bagnaia focuses on his own game. I've always been impressed with the way Bagnaia goes about his job. You look in the last, it's funny enough, I was talking with Pete before we came on here. The last 7 rounds, the ones he's finished, he's won, which is pretty impressive, really. I know he hasn't finished 3 of them, but he's won the other 4 of the last 7 rounds, which is pretty damn impressive. I think Bagnaia, it's always good to have a teammate that pushes you slightly, that is looking at different areas of setup and the like as well. I mean, I fancy Jorge for that berth, and I think Bastianini into Pramac will be the right call. But that's based on looking in from where I am, not looking out from where they are. And these teams, like I said, it isn't a case of putting a pin in the map. This is going to be one that benefits the team, benefits the data, benefits the overall picture. It's not just based on he's got more results here and has done more there. It's going to be much broader than that. And Gigi's no fool. He'll make the right call for the team. And I don't think Bagnaia is going to be affected by whoever goes in there.
Well, it will be an exciting time this weekend to see how it all unfolds, off track and on it. Prediction time, gents. Your first, second, and thirds. Keith.
Well, the first prediction for me is that Luigi Taveri is going into the MotoGP Hall of Fame, which I think is an important thing to point out. And of course, at the same time, and there's a bit of momentum behind this now, is why is Chas Mortimer not yet in the MotoGP Hall of Fame? So I'll just mention that one more time and leave it out there. But Luigi Taveri, no longer with us, sadly, died in 2018. So the Swiss rider is going to be in the Hall of Fame. So congratulations to him. Predictions, oh my God. When you've got the weather as well, that is going to really interfere with it. This is going to be a tricky one. We haven't mentioned the fact that, we haven't mentioned Aleix Espargaro's feet, which is an important thing to think of as well. I mean, Aleix Espargaro, obviously he's had a bit of damage after Silverstone. I mean, the damage limitation that he managed to achieve was remarkable considering. And just to put that in context, when you're riding on fast tracks with fast corners, the willingness for a motorcycle to change direction is really difficult because the gyroscopic effect of a wheel. My old mate Julian Ryder, love him as I do, when he does his little science course for me in the commentary box, as was, you get a bicycle wheel and spin it and hold the axle and then try to turn it. I can't do his voice very well, but But when you're trying to turn it, and the gyroscopic effect basically makes the thing want to stay stable and straight. And the same thing with motorbikes. When you are trying to get that thing from one side to the other, I'm thinking Maggots, Beckett's, Chapel curve, and you've got a busted ankle, you are putting your counter steer to start with your counter steering. You're pushing the wrong way to get the bike to go into the corner, and you're weighting the foot pegs as well to try and make the thing go where you want to go. At the speeds they're pulling, the reluctance for the things to turn and how much physical body effort you have to put in to get them to turn from side to side, knee to knee, is incredible. So, not quite the same thing at the Red Bull Ring. It's more of a point and squirt, but I wonder how much it's going to affect the likes of Aleix Espargaro, who, again, you would be on for a race win with the Aprilia there, because it's got punch out of them low-speed corners. We've seen Aprilia has got that initial punch. So's a Ducati, obviously. It's going to be a really, really interesting weekend, and that's without the weather interfering with it. Do I know who's going to win? Not this week.
Come on, though. Go on. You gotta pick someone.
Is it my turn first? Am I going first?
It's your turn first.
Thanks for nothing.
A short intermission.
I'm going to go with Bagnaia, Zarco, Aleix.
All right, okay. Zarco?
Yep.
All right. No further questions. Pete McLaren, your three, please.
Right. Well, I was going to go with Bagnaia as well, but now you've said about the weather, and now Keith, so I'm going to go Jack Miller for the win. I'm going to say it's going to rain then, and Jack is going to use his usual wet weather magic, and nothing to lose now for Jack, of course. I think Bagnaia, the next few races, it's now or never really for the championship, isn't it? I mean, I thought he was out of it already, but he's now back into it. But these next couple of races should be great for him, and he's got to capitalise on it, hasn't he? He's made up a huge amount of points in the last two rounds, but he's still a long way away. However, if he can keep this run going, and what that means is he can't afford to take massive risks. Obviously, he's got to go for it. But yeah, so I'll say Jack is going to be willing to take a few more risks. And if the weather's a bit dodgy, so I'll go Miller, Bagnaia, and I'll go Jorge Martin for third. I think, former winner there. Again, that's thinking more about dry conditions. But so actually, I'm going to go no Quartararo and no Aleix on the podium this weekend.
Well, I'm going then for a first win since Qatar 2021 for Maverick Viñales on the Aprilia. I'm then going for Bagnaia second, and I've gone a bit rogue, but he was last year's winner, and if there's wet play, Brad Binder might well come a call in to the podium. And I don't think...
Bloody hell, that's a good sporting bet.
I'm like you, Keith. I do love a sporting bet. I love an underdog. Yeah. And I think, we've got, now I'm up there with the points. Last year I was on 0 points for about half the season. So I can afford now to play a little bit around. It's tight at the top. You're still leading, Keith, by 1 point. So me and Pete still tied on 9. So, okay. Well, Keith, Bagnaia and Zarco, Aleix, Pete, Miller, Bagnaia, Martin, and myself, Viñales, Bagnaia, Binder for our podiums. Let us know.
I think you've just blown it, Harry.
Well, we'll find out this time next week. See, if you let me know if you agree with me. Put in the comments, tweet us your predictions. Anyone for a Binder? Binder win? Too far? Maybe. Let us know, and we'll get back to you next week. But I think that just about does it, gents. Nearly out of time. Looking forward to Austria this weekend for some more racing action. Make sure you're tuned in as usual across crash.net for all the latest news and analysis across the week, and we'll be back with you same time next week. Questions in, leave them in the comments section, tweet, Instagram, Facebook us, just search for Crash MotoGP, and please do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, and we shall see you right back here next week. But from myself, Harry Benjamin, Keith Huewen, and Pete McLaren, bye-bye.